Here's everybody. Michaela's online today. Hello, hello. All right, who wants to go first? We're gonna share our proposals. You guys have one? Yeah? Okay, cool. I'm gonna point Michaela at you so she can see. Okay. Tell us your problem and the proposal that you are making.
We have a problem with, sorry Zach, but so we had this whole discussion that football players in the top sport. It was like this big old thing. Really like, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
We said that the audience affected are us, the adult team.
So this is, okay, so the problem is that the football players say that drill is not a sport. And why is this a problem? Who cares what they think?
Because it affects our confidence and our dance. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. So then how are you going to fix this? Get your confidence back.
So we are going to make the football boys do everything that we do.
Perfect.
And so they have to wake up at 4:30 and like come to practice the workouts, and they have to do all the dances. And if they don't do anything, like if they make mistakes in the dance or not have like the skills required, then their football season will be canceled.
Okay, so any mistake that they make.
Yeah, and they have to actually like make the team. So like if they aren't good at something, like a trick, they're literally kicked out and they're out their season.
So if they don't make the drill team, then they can't play football? Okay,
Yes.
what are some of the problems that we could see arising here that people would like not want to participate in this thing?
Well, football players can't dance.
Yeah, so what if like, okay, so what if the football players just decide that we don't need to do Harriman High football anymore? How are you gonna like make them do this? Is there any solution for that? Or are they just like so into football that they will
They're
do it?
super into football.
Okay. Okay, so as we're listening to these proposals, I want to think about what rhetorical strategies they are using to make the proposal, like which of the satirical techniques that I gave you they're using. So I'm going to do this first one. I think they're talking about a parody a little bit, right? Like if I were to see all of the football boys doing the drill team dances, like it's a parody of what drill team does, right? But then when you see the like extreme consequences that happen from it, that's going to show like that's going to give you the confidence back, right? Okay, cool. Let's do another one. Who else wants to share their proposal? Okay, Ethan?
We said that homework is a problem.
Okay, homework is it.
We think teachers can fix this.
We should not do homework anymore. Okay.
Exactly. So we want the teachers to provide us with robots that do our homework.
Oh, okay.
The teachers must also pay for the robots out of their own pockets. They have to be able to program them.
Okay.
To fix the broken robots. Every student will get their own personalized robot.
Okay.
The robot will have like an internalized chef that we can have food when we want.
Wow.
The robot is also a transformer and can give us rides to school. And it's also a counselor so that when we're sad,
Okay. Let's pretend that this group wrote down this proposal and we were reading it in the newspaper about these robots that teachers are going to provide for them. And they're going to do all these things for students. Who is being critiqued in that proposal? Is it teachers or is it students? I think it's mostly students, right? Like I think you guys just roasted yourself. Like you kind of made it like you're so entitled that you need little robots to do everything for you, including cure your sadness. To me, if I would read that, I would think that the problem you were really addressing was that students couldn't deal with the homework. So you were kind of like making fun of like the weakness of students, their weak minds, you know? So was that the intention?
No. But
No.
now that you say it, I kind of realize.
You kind of see it, right? Maybe that's just because it's coming from me as a teacher. I'm just like, well, that's absurd. Let's find another way to think about this. But I do think that like listing all the things that the students get is a way of showing like maybe the problem is the entitlement of students, you know? Okay, let's hear another proposal. Yeah, Abby.
Okay, so our problem was that physics and calculus
Okay.
was created by Charles Newton.
Okay.
So our proposal is gonna go back in time and write back in the system.
Okay.
But when the time machine inevitably fails, I think we should actually make a cult with some God.
Or a godlike entity.
Uh-huh.
So bad.
Are going to be called Mr. Apple Core,
Okay.
like a brain core,
Uh-huh.
but we only eat apple cores. So the cyanide and the seed will make us enlightened.
What's the problem that we're tackling though? Like, what's wrong with them?
Yeah.
Oh, it's too hard. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so I see the parody here in the exaggeration, right? Which is that, like, in some, like, the problem that you're trying to call attention to is that students are thinking, or you guys, or anyone really, is thinking that this, like, calculus and physics is so hard that they would be willing to invent time travel in order to fix how hard physics and calculus are, which I have to assume depend on physics and calculus to be done, right? But then you're going to save, future generations from having to do this thing. So I see the parody there and the extreme exaggeration that you took. Yeah. Okay. Or the satire. How about another group? Does anyone have like a violent one? No? Your guys is okay. Your guys is. I hate how I said that. Yeah. Kennedy, tell me what your violent is.
Well, okay, so basically our problem is that the school lunch sucks. So,
Hang on. Can I just ask? Is it worse this year than years before? Because I liked school lunch last year. Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering. Okay, so it sucks. So what are you gonna do?
so we're going to execute the lunch ladies and replace them with, sorry.
More robots. Okay. Okay. So where are we gonna get the money for this?
Well, from not having to pay the lunch lady.
They're humongous salaries. We're gonna have so much money available to us now.
I'm just gonna say 30,000 a year.
Okay.
I'm just gonna lowball it.
Okay.
And so you add that up to how many lunch ladies there are. So you have, I don't know how many lunch ladies there are, but I'll say at least like 10.
Okay.
So 30,000 times 10, you got $300,000.
To spend on robots.
Okay, so you got the parts.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna replace, I guess we had decided on language arts. So we decided we're gonna replace language arts with a programming class and
Oh.
robotics
Okay.
class. So then they're gonna construct the robots from the parts provided from the salaries cut. Since we don't have to pay the lunch ladies anymore.
Okay. Okay. So
And the robots only have to be programmed to make Texas real fast.
Oh yeah, that's right.
so that they don't actually have to do that much work then, like in the programming
Yeah, so
class.
the food we're gonna
Okay.
serve now, because the food we originally had is pretty garbage,
Uh-huh.
is we're gonna have to serve Texas Roadhouse,
Okay.
and so we're gonna have a bunch of selections, and yeah, just Texas Roadhouse.
Is wait, what was I gonna say? Is the lunch gonna go up? Like, it's only cost $3.30, right? Is lunch prices gonna go up?
No, that's not.
It's still gonna cost $3.30. I don't know that your plan is gonna logically hold.
It won't.
It will. Okay, I'm assured of it.
Because we still have all that funding left over, and then isn't like it's still federally funded, the food. So
Oh,
so they
use
have
that
to federally
instead.
fund our Texas Roadhouse, so it's all full.
Okay, God it. What rhetorical strategies do we maybe see in that proposal? To me, that sounds like an understatement. We're gonna murder the lunch ladies. Moving on, right? Like, that seems like there's an understatement in that one.
You couldn't just fire them?
Yeah, I know. Well, we need to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, why do you want to do this?
It wasn't my idea.
Just to kind of like just so angry at how bad lunch is.
Because then we don't have to find new jobs for them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's out of a kindness. Oh, okay. I see.
Out of special kindness on our part.
Wow, you guys really are thinking of their feelings. Okay, let's get one more. I want one more proposal. Yeah? Okay, what's your proposal?
Okay, so this is really bad, but one major problem here is that there's a lot of mental illness.
Okay.
Like people that have depression, anxiety.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is that we'll have microphones placed throughout the school and much more home monitors, and they listen for anyone that says like I feel sad or I'm anxious or I'm stressed, and just expel them, get them out.
Okay, good. So that we won't have that know, like the people just listening in for all the problems. Okay, so I really like this one because I do think it brings attention to the problem, right? And it criticizes the way that we treat the problem, which is like you hear something, you just send them down to the counselors, just get them out of your classroom, you know, just go talk to those school counselors. I think that kind of like makes fun of that idea a little bit, the way that like we don't actually want to solve the problem, we just want to put Band-Aid over things and just like hope that works. And the only reason I think it uses exaggeration then to solve that, right? Because it's like it's not hyperbole yet. There is a grain of truth in the fact that we've listened for these like sad thoughts and we try and do the least amount possible to try and solve them, right? It's just taken to an extreme with your proposal. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about modest proposal. So you guys found the full version online, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's pull it up on your PDF. On your computers. I do have a few physical copies. Would anyone prefer to look at a physical copy? Physical copies. Pass on all that. Pass that back for me. Pass that all the way back. Anyone else want a physical copy? Pass that all the way back. I got like 5 more. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I just want to make sure we all have the right vocabulary word. So also on your computer, pull up your rhetorical vocab. And we're going to add persona to it. So when you looked up persona for your worksheets, what was the definition that you found? Yeah, Abigail. Okay, good. What's the one right under that one too? Now I'm making you look it up.
Yeah. A role or character adopted by an author or an actor.
Awesome. It's kind of both of those together then, right? Outside sort of personality, the personality that you're conveying to the world. But then the definition I want you to write down is a role or character put on by the author. So in literature, we call that a narrator. In nonfiction or in poetry, we call that a persona. The persona is not always the same as the person writing it. I hope you would know that in this one, Jonathan Swift is not this kind of like psychopathic monster. I feel like we would have maybe heard a little bit more about, you know, his jail sentence or his execution. He's putting on a character here, right? This isn't actually him. Has anybody read Orwell's like Shooting an Elephant?
Yeah.
Okay, for those of you who have read that one, that's a kind of persona there. That's not fully what Orwell is like. He's like he creates this like weak kind of scared imperialist as a way to critique imperialism. So in nonfiction, we don't always trust that the person who is using the words I is actually the author. And that's when we call it a persona. So tell me about the persona in a modest proposal. What's this guy like? Yeah, Kansas. Yeah.
Are we supposed to put this in? Are we supposed to say on campus?
You could submit it on campus or you can turn in the physical copy.
Kind of like, I felt like this kind of this rich aristocrat that like thought that he was being like a humble person when he's not.
Rich, aristocrat, fake humble, like he's what we say virtue signaling right now, right? A little bit. Yeah, I like when he says like, you know, they're gonna build a statue in my name. Once they find out how good my proposal is, they're gonna honor me, you know?
It's more at the end because he's like, oh, this doesn't affect me because my children are too old and my wife can't have any.
Yes.
So this is just for you. I'm not making any money off this.
Yeah, so it's like, it's important to him to say that, like, he's using that as a way to say he's being humble, right? Like, I am just doing this out of the goodness of my heart, but when we read it, we're like, oh, lucky you, your kids aren't gonna get eaten, you know? Yeah, Abigail?
It seems like he's super detached from everything.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Kind of about this like rational kind of thinking, but it doesn't seem rational to the rest of us who are like in society. It seems like he's far away.
Okay, good. So it's like the detachment of like the things that he is proposing. He doesn't seem to fully consider them. Kenton? Okay, good. He seems to be crazy because he's a cannibal. If he is an aristocrat, he is suggesting that aristocrats are the ones that eat the babies, right? And so, I mean, it might not affect him, but he is in the class that gets to benefit from it, you know? So there's something a little bit off about that, I think. What else could we say about this guy, personality-wise? Yeah.
Is he cynical?
Yeah, why do you think he's cynical?
Because he wants to eat babies.
All right, good. So he doesn't seem to have many morals or see a kind of moral understanding in the world, right? Everything is just this kind of super rationality. What kind of job do you think this guy has?
I feel like he's a banker.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because I feel like he just has like a really solid understanding of like the money. 'Cause,
Yeah.
like he talks a lot about like, oh, it costs this much to raise a child from this age to this age and this age to this age.
Yeah.
Like he talks a lot about money.
And I had somebody, not that you can like not check the facts about like how much it costs to raise a child, but I had somebody look up his math, like how he was adding stuff together. I didn't have someone do that. Some nerd did that in my class. And he said it adds up. The math adds up. So he seems to be like competent as a banker too, right? Competent, maybe? Okay, what else do we know about this persona? What other personality characteristics does he have? Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of not, I don't know, but I think when he was like, he really like Hansel and Gretel.
Why?
Because he wants these kids and that's what they're interested, hate kids, so he's probably, I think that was a big influence in his life.
Okay, so he's like got some sort of like, I'm not gonna write that up because it's like it's speculation, but he's got some sort of background maybe. His parents hurt him. Someone did him wrong at some point. Yeah, Sarah?
Also with Aggie, like he's trying to make the babies fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he wants to make them just as delicious as possible. Yeah, real marbled meat. Anything else we know about this persona? Okay, awesome. Let's go to then the part. Well, it's not just detached though, and it's not just crazy. I want to put this up here. He seems to be a psychopath. Like he seems to have no emotions. Yeah, or a sociopath, like either way.
I feel like a psychopath is more descriptive of it.
But he seems to be so detached, right? That it's like he's incapable of it, it seems like, in any aspect. He doesn't bring up emotions anywhere in the essay. He also seems to be, if we go up here, he also seems to be quite arrogant. Where he thinks his plan is foolproof, like no one could possibly object to this. He says that a few times. He's like, I know no one is going to have any problems with this plan because it is so perfect, you know? He seems just like kind of clueless about human behavior. So one thing I want to go to where he calls, I think this is an instance when we understand how he is, when he calls women breeders. What do you think about that? This is a couple paragraphs in. Find that paragraph in your PDF. It's the one that starts the number of souls in this kingdom. That's the first time he does it. Oh, sorry, I want to go back to the persona. Sorry, I'm a little scattered after our lockdown drill. Okay, so you wrote down persona in your rhetorical vocab, right? And you wrote down the definition. Okay, under effects now, I want you to write down why Swift would adopt this persona for his argument. So why do you think that he would present himself in this cold-hearted, detached, arrogant way in this essay? And what kind of effect is that going to have on his audience? I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to write about that in the effects box.
Sorry, which textbooks are you reading?
So you wrote down persona as the vocab word in the definition, and then where it says example, the example is just going to be Jonathan Swift and Ma's proposal, but then the effects are what you're writing about right now. Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we're done kind of analyzing Ma's proposal, because this is sort of the final piece to the puzzle, figuring out why he wrote this thing. I want to add one more word to your vocabulary list, which is metonymy. Okay, so metonymy is substituting a word that is closely related to the thing itself. Okay, it's really hard to imagine what that means just through the definition. Substituting a word that's closely related to the thing itself. Basically, and I've talked about this before, but really briefly, metaphors are like any time you substitute one word for another. That's a metaphor. My love is a red rose. That's a metaphor, right? Within metaphors, you have a specific type of metaphors called a simile, where you use like or as. So if you were to say my love is like a red rose, that would be a simile, but it still counts as a metaphor because you're making that substitution, right? Within metaphors, there is a specific kind of metaphor called metonymy. And metonymy is when the two words are so closely related that it's something even more than a metaphor. Metonymy would be like, the pen is mightier than the sword. This doesn't need to be your example. I'm just using this to show you. Pen is what we use to write with, right? And it's closely associated then to language. And sword in this metaphor means like violence or aggression. And this isn't just a metaphor. This is more specifically metonymy, because since a pen is used to write language, it's very, very closely related to the metaphor, right? And since a sword is used to commit violence, it's very closely related. So that's metonymy. Breeder here is an example of metonymy. So now let's go to that section where he talks about women being breeders. He says, there will remain 170,000 breeders. And it might have taken you a second even to like figure out what that means, who is he referring to there? And as you continue to read, you realize that he is referring to women having babies, right? So what I want you to do, use breeders as your example, and then I want you to talk to the person next to you. What do you think the effect is on the text by using this instance of metonymy? Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
Just like Jake said, countless. Yeah.
So if we're not doing
I think he's trying to. I think he's trying to do both by also trying to get like all the vulnerable people seem stupid. I think that's that idea. This guy's pretty smart. He probably knows what he's talking about. Like,
I think in this case, it's like, present here and I'm going right now.
Okay, take a second, write down some observations there. Why do you think he uses this instance of metonymy? Let me just clarify. So other examples of metonymy might be like calling your cars, I guess this is more like an example from the 1950s, but like calling it your wheels, that would be an example of metonymy. Technically, these are not called glasses, these are called spectacles. So us Americans saying that these are now glasses, that was initially metonymy because they have glass in them, and we just started referring to them by that part. So referring to women as breeders is basically just referring to them by a part of what makes them them, right? Just the breeding part. Yeah, Madison. Yes. Yes, give me a hand would be a good one, or all hands on deck for like sailors. That'd be another one. Yep. Whereas like something like my love is a red rose, rose has nothing to do with love really, you know, like those two things aren't completely connected. So what did you guys say? Why would he refer to women as breeders? What does this reveal about his argument? Yeah, Justin.
It's like the way like he uses it, like defines like literally.
Okay, what's the emotional meaning it gives it then?
It's like using women just for like their biological capabilities.
Okay, good. So it's like it has nothing to do with them then as human beings that might have feelings, which makes sense coming from this persona because he might not understand that human beings have feelings, and instead he is only thinking about the material quality of these people, their biological function. Yeah.
I think it just dehumanizes them altogether.
Yeah.
Kind of just takes credibility from it because, like, I feel like you kind of start staring at, like, when you say breed, like that thing can breed, kind of think of it like in an animalistic way.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, oh, well, it's not really intelligent life in a way.
Yes.
At least, like, usually is what your first thought would be. So it, like, kind of strips credibility in case, like, you know, oh no, it's kind of like, oh, well, they're just breeders, so.
Absolutely. So it's like one of the signs early on that he's being satirical, right? If he really wanted people to follow his plan, he's not going to discount half the population that have to follow through this plan as breeders. It's a exaggeration here that kind of clues us in early on that he's not being serious about eating babies. Were you going to say something, Jenna?
I was just gonna kind of say what she said, but also like it just kind of furthers his idea that he doesn't like truly see the impoverished as real people.
Yes.
Because his whole plan is to eat the impoverished, like their children, not the aristocratic children.
Yes, absolutely.
And so like I feel like he is, and referring to the impoverished women as breeders, I feel like he just doesn't really see them as human or equal.
Yes, definitely. Oh, I forgot to open that after lockdown. Okay, so then that leads us into the context because I want to point out like when he was writing this and why. Okay, so it's 1729. Did it say that at the top of your versions?
Yeah.
Okay, 1729. At this point, Britain has been in charge of Ireland. Britain has ruled over Ireland for 500 years. That's quite a long time. They're pretty sick of it. They were always sick of it. It was never a super welcome thing. But the reason it kind of succeeds is that there is an aristocracy in Ireland that are Protestant. And England at the time in 1729 is a Protestant country. And so this aristocracy has a lot of interest in keeping England there, because then they get to kind of maintain their aristocracy, and that's, you know, often dependent on religion and religious in-groups, right? But the biggest population in Ireland is Catholic. So you've got this small group of rich Protestant people kind of ruling over a really large proportion of poor Catholics in the country. And at the time, there's a famine going on. This isn't like the potato famine that we hear about with immigration to the United States. This is an earlier famine. Because they grow potatoes, it was potatoes too, but I just wanted to be clear about that. So there's a famine going on. England is suffering from this. Ireland is also suffering, but England, because England has said, well, we don't want our people to suffer. So in order to combat the famine, they have imposed a bunch of tariffs and trade restrictions on Ireland, which has exacerbated the problem in Ireland. So people are literally like starving on the streets at this time. You would walk down the streets and there would be somebody like starving. He mentions this in his essay where he says like, oh, how inconvenient it is that these poor people are like everywhere, tripping me up, you know? So the other problem too is that it's overpopulated. This is a stereotype, but stereotypes have a grain of truth. Irish Catholic families tend to be very, very big, partially because of no birth control. So they had like tons of kids running around in Ireland that they can't feed, right? So Swift is born in Ireland, but he's born into this aristocracy. So then he moves over to England. So he's living in England, we'd call him Anglo-Irish. And he has been publishing all of these essays about how we could fix this problem. Real essays, like he's been publishing them in newspapers, and it's been like, hey, let's reduce the tariffs. Hey, let's send over some food and some aid, et cetera, et cetera. And no one's listening to him. I don't remember how many it was, but it was like more than 10 of these essays that he published. No, he gets no attention. He was not famous at the time. No one really cared. And so he publishes this essay in the newspaper. And most people knew it was a joke. Some people didn't, and they were outraged, and they were like, how dare the newspaper print this insane piece of writing, you know? Some people, though, like the majority of people who knew it was a joke, they, going back to our prompt, felt like this is not something that you should joke about. This is in bad taste, basically. That you've like written this whole essay about how like tasty babies are. Like, don't do that. That's not something you joke about, you know? It's grotesque. And yet, everyone started talking about it. This is probably one of the most famous pieces of satire that we have. It's definitely the most famous piece of Juvenalian satire that we have. Like, you'll probably read this again in college and so on. It's everywhere. So in some ways, then it kind of like worked to get the attention that the straight stuff was not getting. Let's look where he starts to like talk about what his proposal is, because this is where I feel like they should have, that small group that didn't understand it was satire, like how could they not? So look at paragraph 9 where it says, I have been assured by a very knowing American. He says, I have been assured by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London that a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or a ragout. It sounds like a recipe book. It sounds like a cookbook right here, right? So tell me, what are some of the ways that you were clued in, like you knew that it was satire in this little paragraph? Jenna?
I feel like kind of saying that like a very well-known American, especially like in this time, before America was like its own country.
Yeah.
And so I feel like especially at that time, a lot of people would have seen Americans as just kind of like these strange people who aren't very educated because they live across the sea in this country that isn't really a country.
Yes, good. So for him to be relying on an American for a good source of information is ironic then. Absolutely, that would be the impression of Americans. They're like backwoods hicks, you know, compared to us English, of course. So that's part of it, is like him being like, it's an American who told me they were doing this. It's also just a joke about America to be like, yeah, Americans are over there eating babies, you know? So we can kind of like get the joke in there that it seems anybody who knew anything about America would say, well, no, they're not. So that kind of clues us in. Anything else in that little paragraph that shows us that it is satire? Yeah, Olivia.
Delicious, nourishing, describing eating a child isn't exactly something.
Okay, so the like wholesome can mean a kind of nourishment, right? But it has that double meaning. So we call it, in this case, we call it a pun. And so the meaning that is associated with like morality, that like wholesome, like a Hallmark movie, that seems like incongruity right there, where we're just like, how could it possibly be seen as wholesome? Is there anything else about like the listing of the delicious, delicious, nourishing, and wholesome, stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled? It seems like over the top, doesn't it? Why would you need to say it that way? You could just say, I propose that we eat their babies. And it could be that still sounds pretty crazy in a certain way, but like the listing makes it more so. Yeah, Sam.
It kind of presents it as like a delicacy more than a necessity.
Good.
And so it really just emphasizes that kind of like dismissal for their life and more like, oh, this could be like a new food for us to try.
Okay, good. So it doesn't seem like something that is like so immediately necessary, right? Like it's like not that you're on a ship and you're all starving, so let's eat the poor person's baby. It's more like we just are bored, and this could be a fun thing to try, right, guys? Kennedy?
I feel like he's trying to put it in like a delicate way so people will be like, because you're like, my humble proposal is that we try this delicious food, not like, let's get cannibals, you know?
Yeah, right. And so by like kind of, it's that detachment again, right? By putting on this like kind of parody of a cookbook in this little moment, it seems like he's trying to like do so much more to convince us of this disgusting idea. Like he is trying to make you imagine how delicious a baby would be. Stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled. Anyone have lunch after this? Fricassee or ragout. Like he is trying to like make your mouth water thinking of this little juicy, you know, baby with its fat little arms and so on. It's the over-the-topness of listing all of those different things. If he had just said baked, it wouldn't have had the same effect as all of these different ways that we could eat the baby, you know? The imagery here, he's trying to use the imagery in order to make you feel like it's going to be delicious, right? The mouth-watering imagery. However, it has the opposite effect, does it not? Like, I think to people at the time especially, this is vile. It is revolting. And each little bit of imagery he adds to it, it becomes more and more revolting. Okay, so his proposal is to eat babies. That's how we're going to fix. That's how we're going to fix all these problems, right? Let's go through how he justifies that. Yeah. Yeah, I do. And I was the oldest, and there's a bunch of kids, so I hate babies, obviously. My brother would have been delicious. He was 12 pounds when he was born. And my mom's really thin. Like my mom's a skinny. She had a 12-pound baby. Like he came out and he could already like prop himself on his elbow because it was just like all the fat. And then he had really thick. He's not redheaded anymore, but he had thick red hair when he was born. So he looked like he had a little toupee. Like he looked like he was gonna sell you a used car. He was so hideous. Anyway, okay. So he would be a perfect candidate for this because at the time you also were not super well off. So I think he could have added a lot of nourishment for the Irish. How is this proposal, how is this going to solve the problem? Like, what are the justifications he gives? Yeah, Jenna.
It provides food for people, but it also provides money.
Yeah.
Because they're selling the baby.
So it's food for the aristocracy, because they're the ones that are going to be, because it's not cannibalism, right? Like, we've been calling it cannibalism, but technically it's not, because the rich and the poor are different species. We all know that, right? And so the rich are eating the poor babies, but if they're just like animals, then it's fine, you know? And the poor then benefit because they're going to make money off selling their babies to the rich. Okay, how else will this plan work? What else is it going to solve? Miguel?
They also don't need to worry about feeding their kids because they're just gonna eat them, so.
Overpopulation will be solved, right? Because if there's a baby, you can just sell that off and you won't have to worry about feeding it. Good. Yeah, Jenna?
There's one part where he's talking about how it's gonna help the economy of the country because we're gonna start like exporting some babies.
Jobs and economy. It gives Ireland a new export. Excellent. A whole industry is going to have to rise up out of that, right? You're going to have people like packing up the baby. I could get really gross with this. I'm not going to. But you have to have this whole industry to prepare the babies to ship them out, so the economy is going to help. Ethan? Same thing. Okay, there's other reasons. What are some other reasons that this is going to work? There's some other things he talks about this problem solved or this solution solving. Yeah, Haley.
Like it kind of get rid of poverty because the poor people are making money off of selling their babies. They could eventually become like maybe middle class.
Ultimately, this whole thing, is going to solve poverty. We're going to be able to raise these people who can't feed themselves right now out of the lower classes into middle classes. Yeah.
Doesn't he say that he solves the problem of poor people having aborting their bastard babies?
Yep. Or just any babies at all. No more abortions, he says, because instead of mothers killing their babies before they are born, we'll kill their babies after they're born. No more abortions. It works. Okay, what other problems does it solve? Ella?
I think you mentioned something about they're already suffering, so why not end that suffering?
Okay. It's like the lunch ladies. Ends the suffering of children. Yeah, good. Okay, Mark?
He talks about how it ends domestic violence because the men aren't beating their wives.
Yeah, that one cracks me up. The men will see that their wives are worth something now. They didn't see that before, but they'll see that now. Their wives have a monetary value, right? If they beat their wives, they run the risk of, the wife leaving them and not being a good money source, or, all sorts of risks. So there isn't going to be any more domestic violence because the men are going to see that their wives are actually worth something, right? And then in that same paragraph, it talks about the how mothers will be now. What will happen with mothers? It talks about how mothers will like their kids. Moms will actually care for their kids. So he kind of assumes, well, mothers couldn't possibly love these little things, right? But if they're worth a lot of money, then moms are going to put a lot of effort into caring for these kids so that when they reach a certain age, we can sell them off. So it's perfect. Yeah. Any other things that we're going to get from this proposal, Bailey? What was that?
Like the mothers be able to work.
Awesome. Did he mention that in there?
Yeah,
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. Two sources of income. Yeah, so another boost to the economy. Yeah, exactly. Only for a year, right? They're only out for a year, and then they can go back to the workforce until they have another baby, and that becomes their job. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Didn't he say that the men would stop beating their wives because they're actually
Yeah, the no more domestic violence one. They're actually producing something of value. Yeah. Did you guys catch? It's not just babies aren't just good for eating; they're good for other things too. What was it? Yeah. Fancy goods. And in that way, then it probably has some extra benefit for the aristocracy, right? The aristocracy gets a new trend. And to go back to what Sam was saying, the aristocracy gets a new delicacy. So they get to benefit from it. Everybody wins, The other kind of implied thing here is that it's going to create further divides between classes, which is a good thing in his case. Because it's we'll be able to tell who is the have and who is the have-not very clearly here. And then there's something he says about Catholics. Did you catch something he says where he says no more papists? Or fewer? He's saying fewer people, why can't I write this? Fewer people who believe in the Pope, so fewer Catholics, which is always a benefit to a Protestant. All right, any other things that you saw in there? I think we basically covered it. What does plan work? Yeah, right.
I think, doesn't eating human flesh make you go clinically insane?
What was it?
Doesn't eating human flesh make you go clinically
I
insane?
think that's just a myth.
That's a Wendy.
Because you can eat the
That's a
tendons, I
Wendy.
heard, but if you eat anything else, you're gonna actually ruin your.
So
Yeah.
one reason they think that cannibalism became such a taboo is because there are lots of diseases that can be passed through cannibalism that can't be passed from eating other animals. So like cows, if they ate each other, could spread mad. I guess mad cow can be spread anyway. That was a bad example. But there are certain diseases of the mind that humans have and certain diseases that you could pass through the consumption of human meat. So they think that that's what caused that taboo. But there have been lots of people in situations like that soccer team in the Andes or whatever that they eat each other and they're okay. They end up okay, you know. They don't totally go crazy. So in that way, maybe it won't work though. But in Jonathan Swift's time, they wouldn't have known the genetics or the biology of it yet. It would have been this taboo. So someone said, I think logically it would work. It would, I think. I think logically this is really sound. Look at all of his reasons why it's going to work. I think that all of these reasons logically work. Like I can't find anything that I would say, oh, I don't think that will be the case. Abigail? Oh, I just sort of mentioned that. Does anyone know the story? I think they were soccer team right then. And their plane went down in the Andes, and how long were they there for? Like months.
I feel like, I don't remember. I read it last year.
Yeah, it was the winter, and so they kept dying off. First, people died in the plane crash. They crashed the plane. First, people died in the plane crash, and they just sort of put them out in the snow. And then as they were starving, they were like, no one's coming to get us. So they had to start eating the dead bodies.
Donor party.
Yeah, it's a Donna party type of story. Yeah, yeah, but it's more recent. I think it was the 70s. Do you remember? I want to say 70s or 80s. There's an Ethan Hawke movie about it. That's what I remember, but barely it turns out. Anyway, so back to this. Yeah, Bailey.
So logically, I think it would work, but morally, I think it would, because most of the population in Ireland is Catholic, and with their big families, I think they would like having kids, like their children.
They want kids around, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that like this eating children portion like is morally don't work.
Okay, good. So I think he's messed up the rhetorical triangle a little bit here, right? If we've got logos, pathos, and ethos. He does a whole lot in the beginning to establish his ethos. He's like, I know all the numbers. I know I want to solve this problem. I'm a good guy. I'm out here to do good things, you know? They're going to build a statue to me. They're going to love this so much. So his ethos is huge. His logos, I think, works. I think he uses a very classical argument structure, which is to explain the problem, propose a solution, justify your solution. And to me, logically, that all adds up. If the Irish were to, go through with this, it probably would solve the poverty problem. However, what Bailey points out here correctly is that there is absolutely no pathos in the essay, right? He has no moral understanding of how people actually do things. So this is part of the reason that people were so horrified when they read the thing. They were just like, how could, this guy is inhuman, this guy's a monster. Even if he is joking, how could this guy possibly joke about something this serious, And yet there are clues in this throughout that it's satire, and there's clues to what the actual argument is in the thing. So what I want you to do for about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, I don't think it needs to be longer. I want you to find the following things in this proposal. I want you to find incongruity. I want you to find a reversal. I want you to find verbal irony, situational irony, exaggeration, understatement, and parity. All right, so with a partner, I think with a partner, find one instance, and I want them to be different instances throughout the essay of incongruity, reversal, irony. And you did this you did part of this in the worksheet, right? If I'm remembering. Did you do all of them?
No, we just did.
I'm
We got
just-
to find like that.
That's right. Okay, cool. So use the ones, the three. If you already found one of these things, use one of those ones that you guys that you found on your worksheet, but you just share it with the other person, so you have a little discussion about where that occurs. Okay, go for that.
So
Hey, Aaliyah. So I am recording this session, so you'll be able to see everything we did up until this point. Class is going to be ending in about 15 minutes. So you'll want to watch that recording and take some notes on our discussion that we had, just so I know that you watched it. And then Michaela, and this for Leah too, you guys heard what I was saying about like finding the different rhetorical strategies in the text, right? Okay, cool. Yeah, I can listen. You grab it. Find parity. Okay, one instance of each.
Or it's not like this.
I think situational irony, like, just like situational.
Oh, it basically is. So incongruity and consistency are just about the same.
So incongruity is, I think, understatement is like
Yes.
It's all sorts of
he understates like,
Just write it in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have
You
it.
can probably just write it on your computer.
Discuss. I just want you to discuss it. I know it's.
I just realized that I had the definition.
Yeah, I just had questions like, where are we supposed to write this? All I want is you to have a discussion about how you know it's satire by finding each of these 7 things.
I think he kind of exaggerates one part he says their everyday diet of running like very
I actually wrote that down. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I wrote that down too. So that's
He goes to his wife, she's like, hey,
And maybe
she's like,
I
And like 79 says it's so much things so they're here but probably and also more active and it's more like situational because like like they don't it's like
And then verbal irony, that would be an example of like make an example of like how like they approve of it.
They like all these people.
Yeah,
I know, and it's.
I'm assured by my American friend. Like, oh yeah, Americans totally situational irony.
I wrote something down about that. I wanted to say maybe yeah.
Oh yeah, the situational irony would be like, so they expect that this argument will actually like help famine like in a productive manner, but then it's like, well,
Yeah, sure.
well, it's unexpected his proposal. So his proposal is situational irony, you know, like fixing famine, like you think that.
At the beginning, it sounds like a really valid.
Yeah, and then it's like he looks into it.
Exaggeration. The exaggeration would be using it where he's talking about it like delicious.
To me about
They're delicious.
and then he doesn't. It's kind of reversing like
You guys are
things. Like
I had to.
they need to institute this with his proposal before they do any of the other things that were like.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
They can easily just say I died, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Right,
like,
he lists like all these problems that were like.
yeah, me too. We discussed that, yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking person two, but then like I didn't finish. But then like I was in California, I was super hungry.
I want to know why that came up. Are you just talking about whether or not you actually want to eat a baby?
We're talking about down.
No, because I don't like fish, so I wouldn't like babies.
Life or death. I'm saying that I'm not saying that me personally, but I'm saying that I don't understand if someone like who is really would actually eat a baby if they had to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I just wanted you to, I wanted you to see, like, to point out all of the places where he gave very good clues that this was satire, right? Where it was clear that he is critiquing something. But what is he critiquing? That's going to give us the argument. What is his, if his literal argument in this is let's eat the babies, it's going to solve poverty. What is his his actual argument? I don't know how to, let's call this one the surface level argument is let's eat babies, and his actual argument, what is that? Abigail?
That this country has a lot of problems, and I think he's kind of arguing this due to them not having their own life that they're controlled by the British.
Okay, so there's something that is being controlled, there's something being critiqued here about the fact that this British guy, even though he was born in Ireland, basically associated with England now, is making these proposals for Ireland, right? Because this is how the situation Ireland has always been in. At least for the last 500 years, England has made decisions for Ireland and Ireland has suffered. So here's just one more English guy making a decision for Ireland, and it's critiquing that part. Why? How is it critiquing that, though? How is it critiquing the English? Yeah, Kenton.
Shows that like that's what they're doing. That's they actually are not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that he's making fun of the English in all of the parts to the essay. So at the beginning when he's like, isn't it just terrible, the poverty in Ireland? But as we hear about it, we hear more about how it's an inconvenience really to him. That feels like it's making fun of the English way of seeing the problems in Ireland, right? The solution that he has when he sees the Irish as inhuman, that's making fun of the English. and then all of his justifications that just drive a further wedge between social classes, that's making fun of the English that is a very aristocratic type country. Yeah, Justin.
Like it's kind of like the hyperbole, like he used like hyperbole, like through the proposals, like kind of like make fun of the English, like how crazy it is.
Yeah, like it's not just exaggeration, right? It is outside the realm of possibility that the English would actually eat a baby because they think it's a delicacy. And so by creating this kind of hyperbole, he's suggesting, but he kind of suggests like there is truth in this, at least in your attitudes. Yeah, Ellie?
He talks about how like the addition of carcasses to the exportation of barreled beef, and like in the footnotes it says how that beef is like being exported to England. So like this proposal will benefit the.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Say that last part again.
So he's like saying that the proposal will benefit the English.
Yeah, right. It's like this is going to be so much better for us over here who are not directly affected by this thing. In the very last paragraph, he says something. He says, I desire those politicians who dislike my overture and may perhaps be so bold to attempt an answer that they will first ask the parents of these mortals whether they would not at this day think it a great happiness to have been sold for food at a year old in the manner I prescribe. So he's in that sentence, he is saying to a politician, none of your proposals have worked. In fact, he's even saying you haven't made any other proposals. He's like, if you have a proposal, for sure, make that proposal. But he says, first, go talk to the Irish about how miserable they are. And I think that's part of this underlying argument is how detached the English are and how much that creates this like not caring at all. Okay, just to wrap things up, so I canceled the essay on a modest proposal because I'm so far behind in grading. But you do have like a multiple choice thing to do over the weekend. That's like, it'll be like 15 minutes. It's a small practice. And I believe that is all before next time. I want your worksheets, so make sure you have your name on those. If you turned it in online, then that's good. You don't need to turn in this paper version. But if you have the paper version, go ahead and pass that to the front.
I turned it in online, if you want the.
Oh, you did it on this too? Oh, you took the picture. Yeah. No, you can keep it or toss it anywhere else. Actually, don't toss it. We're going to be using it next time a little bit. We're not done talking about eating babies yet. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. No, we need that. Someone doesn't say here, right? No. Thank you. Yeah. All right, once you're clean, you can go. That's a bit early. Thanks. All right. So Aaliyah, it will be open on Canvas to submit your notes. Michaela, you are good. And I will explain how to do it on that Canvas. I mean, it's basically just watch the video, take some notes while we're talking, and then submit that. But it'll also describe the prompt at the beginning of class too.